timing. If you, I'll let you know when you'll hear the bell when it goes off, but you don't have to feel like you get caught off in the mid-sentence. It's just basically a guideline so that you don't go for too long. But
right.
Yeah, so I'll set my timer and you can start whenever you'd like.
All right. Okay.
And you can make me, I can be your audience, your big grand audience of one. If you want to make me 5 different coaches, feel free.
All right. Well, I think we'll have to get to that in a second. But
okay.
Anyway, now, we've talked about the principle of mastery, and we've talked about the elm tree analogy, and now we move on to another concept, another principle in this double goal coaching model that PCA suggests is worth your serious consideration. And this slide, which is entitled "Which Car Would You Rather Be Driving?" is a question to you, Kelly, and the coaches in the audience. Before you answer, though, we had an interesting response the other day. A coach said, "What does the rest of the car look like?" So, for the purposes of answering this, you have to assume that both fuel gauges are in identical cars. And assuming that's the case, which one would you rather be driving?
Definitely full, all the way.
Right. And of course, the next question is why? And
I'm more relaxed when I'm driving with a full tank. I'm not panicking, wondering when it's going to die.
Right, absolutely. Empty tank, low tank, can't go very far. Full tank, no anxiety, which is a great thing in any circumstance, and we can go a lot farther. And that brings us to the second principle in that of those 3 principles we mentioned a few minutes ago. And this second principle is called filling the E-tank, or the emotional tank. Now, it's important to understand, and it's important for me to remind myself always, that everyone has an emotional tank. And that includes coaches, and it includes players, and it includes trainers, and it includes administrators and parents. And it has to, and it really is foundational for what we should be trying to do as coaches. I have a marvelous favorite coach that happens to be at Stanford, where close to where our national headquarters are. His name is David Shaw. And if you get a chance to take a look at David Shaw speak, or pay a little bit of attention to him, I think you'll get a fabulous example of someone who's really concerned about the emotional tanks of his players. Last year, they were having a mid-season scuffle, and their quarterback, a really good one named Kevin Hogan, was going through a difficult period of time. His father had been suffering a prolonged illness, and he eventually died in December. And Kevin had all kinds of expectations. He was filling the shoes of Andrew Luck, who might have been the best college quarterback in the last 10 years and had been the starter at Stanford before him. His performances were subpar. They were tense. They were less than what everybody expected of Kevin. And Coach Shaw and his coaches and some other players took the time to figure out what was going on with Kevin and lift his spirits and offer support, and in a very meaningful way, both athletically and otherwise, helped fill his emotional tank during a very, very difficult time. 2 more quick examples. I had an 18-year-old shortstop some 20 years ago, right about this time, 23 years ago to be exact, who came to me after a game and said, "I don't think I can do this. I should have gone to the University of Michigan. I'm not hitting well. I miss my family." He's in Tampa playing in a rookie league with the New York Yankees, and his name is Derek Jeter. And we sat in an empty locker room. Everyone had left on folding chairs, and his eyes were moist. And he kept telling me I should have gone to the University of Michigan. We talked for a while. We talked about what his future held. We talked about how so many kids go through what he's going through. He had never been through any kind of major difficulty like this in the past. Over time, in the next week, he got a little better. In the next few weeks, he got even a bit better. And 3 or 4 years later, he's in the major leagues. He's Rookie of the Year, and the rest is history. And maybe the most immediate and recently moving example to me occurred in the last few days. I know a young man named Cam. His dad's a former college football player, a youth sports coach, a fireman, a tough guy. And Cam is a 9-year-old baseball player and is having all kinds of difficulty. Strikeout, air, hang head, walk on, walk off the field. Given a chance for extra practice, didn't want to do it. recently, after his dad had changed his approach some and coaches recognized what Cam was going through, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's been fabulous. There's been a miraculous change in his performance. There hasn't been one technical change in his swing, his throwing motion. His attention has become he's become much more engaged on the field. He smiles. He handles the occasional bad play now without hanging his head. And I saw him play this weekend, and it was absolutely inspiring to see Cam hit a ball over the right field fence, to see him smile, to see him interact with his father in a very positive way. And this all came about because Cam's emotional tank was dead dry empty. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And it no longer is. So it was started by coaches and parents, enhanced by his play. And what we find, and I have found it in my career and in talking to other coaches, and I think research indicates this as well, that when E-tanks are empty, you have players who are pessimistic, who give up more easily, as Derek Jeter was contemplating at one point, as young Cam contemplated every minute he was on the field, and they're certainly less coachable. Now, when that situation changes, and experience tells me, just as research does, that this is absolutely the truth, they're more optimistic, they certainly handle adversity better, and they're way, way more coachable and easier to communicate with, and are willing to make adjustments. And there is, in my coaching life, some 45 years, this principle of paying attention to and filling emotional tanks is maybe the most significant thing that I'm aware of. If I can only tell a young coach one thing, I would tell him, be aware of emotional tanks, understand how coaching affects emotional tanks, and every day assess your kids. They show up and walk in the field, they have a smile, they have energy, they don't, there may be something going on that you can address. Now, coaching is inevitably involves some emotional tank draining. We make corrections. That's part of the deal. That's not. I used to think that was the only reason we got paid. I no longer think that. And so tanks drain and tanks fill. I want to gauge, Kelly, audience, if I could, in a quick exercise, maybe 2 if we have the time.
Yep.
But after a mistake, and I've seen this for years and years, and saw it again this weekend when I was watching some young kids play. Where do players look after they make a mistake?
Their coach.
Their coach. Anybody else?
Their parents.
Yes. Any other?
I think the fans in general, or they look at their teammates. They look to blame something on their teammates usually.
Sometimes. We have the one I saw yesterday looked at the ground and did it repeatedly. I've seen that some. I see a lot of coach check with young kids. I see a lot of parent check. This particular case, this player looked at the ground, and he had 2 or 3 mistakes in relatively rapid succession. I think one led to the other and led to the other. But as a coach, and you have a player on the field, and he or she makes a mistake, and the head hangs and vision is directly down at the ground, how do you respond to that in game? What can you do? What would a good coach do to fill this player's obviously depleted emotional tank?
I think find a way to get his spirits back up, to help him realize that it was just a mistake and he's got to move on and get ready for the next play.
How do you get an interesting thing to me, and I don't propose to have the answer to this, but how do you get his attention when he's staring at the ground? Yelling at him, okay? How do you do that without?
I think, calling his name in a positive way, to know that, you see what he's doing, you saw the mistake, but, you're going to say, come, Marc, and then once you have his attention, and then he can see that you're positive, that your head's not down too.
Right. And interestingly, that's a wonderful answer. Fabulous answer. Interestingly, I saw a young coach yesterday do pretty much the same thing. Got the players' attention, and then made a and then he made a gesture to him. Once you have his attention, something else has to be done. This coach made an X in the dirt with his foot and clapped his hands. And I asked the coach after what he was doing, and he said, that's what we do when we make a mistake. We exit out and go on to the next play. And the coach did a great job. The player didn't respond particularly. It responded okay, but didn't engage in the mistake ritual. So maybe an example of the imperfection of what we're trying to do, and we keep trying, and maybe in a week or 2 weeks or a year or 2 years, he engages the mistake ritual and gets rid of it. 1 second exercise, and I'll leave it alone right now. We're running out of time.
That's okay. You got about another minute. You're good.
Yeah. So this emotional tank filling and draining is critical. It's critical to remember that coaches do drain tanks, and criticism and correction is part of it. And that, it seems to me, is necessary. The type of criticism has to be presented the right way. Sarcasm, ignoring the person, and nonverbal bad coach body language on the bench is not the best way. Truthful, specific praise, and there's nothing more important, I think, than understanding the concept of truthful and specific praises. It's critical. Just good job is not enough. You need to cite some action, some activity. Appreciation in a lot of different ways. Expressing appreciation fills e-tanks. Listening to players, I found over time, is absolutely important. When I was a young coach, I didn't, coach, what can a player teach me? Later on, I figured out it was an awful lot. Nonverbals, great bench, posture, body language is the hallmark of really good coaches. And finally, as we know that coaching is criticism and support, there needs to be and
10 minutes is short.
It is. And you need to have a mix of the two. And there's a ratio that we look for, and that research tells us is critical. And I asked the audience, what do you think? 1-to-1, 2-to-1, whatever. And of course, we know through research, and this is something I did not know as a coach, with this kind of specificity, that this magic ratio where the great things happen is basically 5 acts of praise to 1 act of criticism. Ding.
Ding. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Did that seem shorter to you than normal, or did it seem like pretty good?
It seems like, well, I had to watch, so I knew it was, I didn't check it till about 9. No good. That's always a consideration for me, or it's always something I always remind myself is time's going by faster than you think it is. Yeah,
it always does. I find it, especially when you tell stories, and you had 3 really good stories in there. Stories take a lot more time than people realize. And, you know, you put in 3 stories, next thing you know, 7 minutes have gone by, and you're like, wow. It's also surprising sometimes too, how much information you can put in 10 minutes and what you can actually relate in that short of amount of time. I thought you did great. I love your conversational rather than authoritarian type of presenting. You know, I really felt like you were just talking to me, and I think that's great. I think your experience alone gives you credibility enough that I want to listen to what you have to say. So I love the way that you brought in like the Derek Jeter example, but also the example of a 9-year-old. I think it's important to kind of bridge the gap. And I thought that was a great way to sort of introduce. What I might suggest that you do, because I thought your David Shaw story was great, Derek's story is great, Cam's story is great, maybe spread them out a little bit instead of telling all 3 right in a row. Start with the David Shaw story. I thought was really awesome. I mean, that's a powerful story to tell how, a kid can actually be transformed because of emotional tank filling. And then you went right into your other 2. Maybe hold off, introduce the principle a little bit more, the details of it, and then use the Derek Jeter story and the Cam story a little bit later on, just to spread them out a little bit. But I thought, as I said, they were very good. The one thing that I didn't hear was I'd like to hear a little more specifics of what you did for like an 18-year-old rookie coming in? Like, I know you said, you listened to him and you had him look ahead, but like more specifics, like what do you do? Because a lot of coaches are probably sitting there saying, yeah, I coach high school kids. And some of them do feel like, you know what? I've had a kid say to me, I thought I wanted to play in college. There is absolutely no way I can play at college the way I'm playing right now. So when kids have that kind of defeat attitude, what do you do specifically? What are some things that you did that, led him to Rookie of the Year soon after? That's a lot of tank filling that you got to do. So I would love to hear a little bit more of that. I think with that story, just some specifics.
Good.
I love when you said the story about Cam, about how there were no technical changes. You brought that up, and I think that's a really good point to make, that it wasn't that he had to swing that much better or catch a ball better. His form had to change. His attitude made all the difference in the world. And I think that's a crucial point of filling tanks that you brought up. I thought that was great. I love it also when you said, these are things I did not know as a coach. That is something that connects the audiences right away. When they say, this guy up here has been coaching for, 40 plus years, and he wasn't always perfect. He wasn't always great. I think it's really important for us as coaches to kind of share our mistakes and what we learned with coaches, because then coaches are shaking their heads like, oh yeah, I was there. There's hope for me. I can change how I'm coaching too. So I think that's really powerful. The one thing that I would like to see is just some more audience engagement a little bit earlier on. I think it took until about 3 minutes left for you to kind of ask me a question and get me thinking a little bit. And I think it's good that you have activities in mind. Maybe bring them in a little bit sooner. That's just one suggestion I have. But, over the course of the entire workshop, I'm sure you're going to be sprinkling that in. But, other than that, I thought you did a great job.
Thank you.
Fun to hear you.
It's and I appreciate the comments. I think those are very helpful.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to ask you, and this has been a debate, we put criticism in the negative column, in the tank draining column, and there's been some pushback even within PCA about, is that word, like as coaches, is the word criticism the correct word? Is criticism always negative? Or as coaches, is it our role to criticize? And we've at PCA, actually, I'd like to hear your opinion first before I kind of tell you where we fall on this.
Well, I think we're transmitting information, and the way it's transmitting can turn it into criticism or can turn it into information transfer. Information transfer is positive, and criticism, if you want to make a linguistic distinction between the two, is presented in a negative way. And so you talked to me about feedback, and you guys want feedback. That's a much more positive way to present the fact that I did something that wasn't so whoop-de-doo great. And that's a better way to do it. If coaches don't pass on information or don't provide critiques to their players, they're showing a disinterest that ultimately is a huge tank drainer to a mature athlete.
Yeah.
So I think, and that's a note I made in preparing for this, is that the game is a tank drainer. The game can be a tank filler. Transfer of information done the right way should be a tank filler. And I think the Wooden study kind of, they talk about him being very positive in what he does, and tons of his comments most of his comments are information transfer. So,
yeah, the slide, I think it's slide 22 or whatever it is, the one that has what drains the tank and what fills the tank. Yeah. There's been some debate over whether criticism and correction, should that necessarily be a tank drainer? And I think the way that we felt is that, the actual word criticism in and of itself has a negative connotation if you're criticizing somebody. But correction, critique, feedback, those are all things that I think should be in the positive positive column. And I do bring that up at my workshops, that where it says truthful, specific praise, of course, like I almost feel like of course that's going to be positive, but correction, what column should that be in? And I actually bring that up with the audiences sometimes. Let's think about correction. Can you give negative correction? Yeah. Can you give a positive correction? Yes, you absolutely can. So that's just something I wanted to bring up with you, because actually one of the people that went last week said, as coaches, it's our job to criticize. And that was one of my my feedback that I gave to them, that it's actually not our job to criticize. It's our job to give them, as you said, information sharing, feedback, critique in order to improve, tell them what they've learned. But the idea of criticism, I think, inherently is a negative connotation. So I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
Right. Yeah, I've thought about the same thing.
Yeah. And as we revisit these workshops and as we edit them and as we change them and we hear from audiences and we get the ideas, I think that's something that's going to be a little bit shifting over the next year or so as we edit through this. Because
being new to this, I'm very sensitive to what PCA's done and the quality of their content and all the work that's gone into developing it. And I think, and I believe when I brought new people into an organization that there probably ought to be a period of time where you just shut up and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people that would come to work for our organization and they would immediately start talking about, we need to do this, we need to do this, and we may already do it, haven't got there yet, and you may have a definition of criticism and correction as you're presenting to me that kind of handles a question I had. So I kind of purposely shut up about that stuff.
Yeah. And it does come up too when you do the 5-to-1 ratio, because the ratio is positives to criticisms. It doesn't say positives to corrections. So that's another place that we bring it up, that we're talking about 5 positives for 1 criticism, not 5 pieces of information. Some of those information can be tank filling critique, tank filling feedback. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and that's a very good point. That leads me to comment that if 5 positives to a negative, I had a coach ask the other day, is it okay to tell a guy he made a stupid play? And I said, well, there's probably a better way to put it.
Yeah, it's probably a better phrase.
Yeah, and maybe a more specific one and not such a pejorative one. But at any rate.
That was a bad choice. That was a bad decision. It's a little bit better than stupid play, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Marc.
I appreciate the comments.
Yep, sure. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.